Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of the Laugh at Pat podcast, hashtag Patchats. The music that you are hearing now is from today's guest, DJ and producer Will on Cloud9, and this is his track, Crossroads. I've known Will for many years now, 6 or 7 years at least, and we met through mutual friends kind of in the festival scene and electronic music scene here in Northern California. And from the first time I met Will, I really liked him. He's just got great energy, and we had a lot of fun dancing and grooving together at various festivals, enjoying the finer things in life. And, throughout the beginning of our friendship, I noticed that he was, DJing sometimes at house parties and at pre-games. And, then we kind of lost touch, and I hadn't heard from him for a while, but I still followed his social media, and I saw that he had started to put out some original tracks that he had, written and produced. And anytime I have a friend who is doing something creatively, trying to make something artistic and put it out into the world, I think that is just so brave and inspiring, and so I always want to check it out and try to support as best that I can. And so I started listening to his music, and I really I dug his sound and his music. And so about a year ago, I reached out to him, and I was doing an art project at the time called Dancing Doodles, which you can still check out on YouTube, that involved kind of hand-drawn visualizers that were brought to life using stop-motion animation, and I offered to do one for one of his tracks. And so we ended up collaborating on this track, Crossroads, and I'm going to show you guys a little bit of that at the end of this introduction before we get into our conversation. And we collaborated on that, and then we stayed in touch. And so when I started thinking of people that musicians and producers and DJs that I could talk to for the podcast, he was someone that I thought of immediately. So today we finally got the chance to sit down and talk, and we talked about his kind of journey into music, how he kind of made the leap from playing at house parties to starting to host his own events and play bigger shows. We talked about his creative process. We talked a little bit about the business of music, how some of his tracks have gotten signed onto various label compilations and whatnot. And we talked about his move to San Diego and working in the collective called Umbrella Friends down there, and how he has navigated the pandemic as a musician and an artist. And so it was a really fun conversation and really interesting. Will has some really great music and is just a great guy, so I highly recommend that you check him out. The link to his Spotify is in the description below. He also has a new track called Sporadic, which you are going to hear a little bit of at the end of this podcast on a new label compilation called Saucy Selections, which is one of the most sauce-tastic names I've heard. So you can check that out tomorrow. The track comes out tomorrow, link in the description below, and you can hear a preview today at the end of the podcast, so definitely stick around for that. But without much further ado, here's a little bit more of Will's track, Crossroads, with my visualizer, and then our conversation. Enjoy. Well, okay, so to get started, obviously we've known each other for a while, and I knew you when you were just Will, not Will on Cloud 9. But for those people who might be watching who don't know you, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and like about your music?
Yeah. So I'm Will, just like you said. I picked up the name on Cloud 9 back when I was living in San Jose. I'm from San Jose in the Bay Area. And I started I've been doing music kind of like my whole life. And I'm classically trained on saxophone. And I've always been interested on making music. But when I really got into electronic music, experiencing the scene, I found an outlet to express it in and really good programming that I just picked up easily. And I already had a music background, so I was able to jump on it. And DJing just kind of hopped on that really easily.
Okay, that's super interesting because obviously, as I alluded to before, we were friends and kind of met in the scene, like at a festival and everything. But I never knew that about you, that you used to play the saxophone and stuff when you were growing up. When did you start picking that up?
Yeah, I went to like a middle school that was a performing arts kind of middle school, and it was a public school, but they kind of like forced you to pick like a program to kind of stick in. And I decided to do band and drama, so I was kind of like involved in that at that point. But the kind of crowds that were doing it were not really what I was super like about outside of school. So like when I was like in school, I was doing really creative stuff, but outside of school, I wasn't as much doing creative stuff. So when I eventually had that, where I could had that connection between like my friend group and what I want to do creative,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't come on till later on. But the background stuff, I just got to learn how to play saxophone in a traditional kind of band. So it was,
Yeah.
and I learned how to read and write music, although I can't read and write music as well anymore because I approach it a lot differently these days. I still have that understanding, and like my whole music theory knowledge comes from then.
Yeah, that it's a good foundation. Well, so I always am interested to hear like what kind of music was like. Are your parents musical at all? Like, do they play, or what kind of music was listened to around the house when you were growing up? What were those kind of like early influences for you?
My parents like are super passionate about music, but they've never like explored their own passion with their own talents, I would say. But I was always exposed to like a big variety. Like my dad's like super into like classic rock, but he was also into disco too, which was kind of weird for someone his age to be into those two
Yeah,
genres because usually one hated the other side. But he would, and he was the kind of person when he was in a car, he would have to blast music as loud as possible, which is kind of like what I do too. And then
yeah,
my mom grew up kind of in the Madonna phase, and she was like totally would try to dress like Madonna and go out to clubs and that kind of a scene. So she's more like in the
yeah,
pop scene, but they would always play like party music, and it would
yeah,
always be like more like energetic kind of stuff. And I didn't understand this like while I was listening to it, but especially like being exposed to like a disco scene and rock kind of background, and the crossing of genres being like that exposure definitely like influenced the variety that I ended up liking instead of it just being like one influence like some people households do
yeah,
sometimes. You just get one kind of music because that's just what they like. But
yeah.
there's a big variety, but no one was like super passionate in my family as much as like I guess I picked it up.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also always interesting to ask that because yeah, like when you're growing up and you're hearing whatever your parents are playing or something, you need the like kind of the space and context to look back and kind of reflect on like like the example of your dad blasting the music in the car always. It's like you can kind of see like a seed planted in you know, just like blasting good tunes and whatnot. So then, like, at what age did you kind of like start getting introduced to like electronic music and start getting like interested in that?
In high school, I would always listen to music, and for some reason my mind would be more focused on the rhythms rather than the big noises that were like the main fronts or the vocals that were just popping out. I would always be listening more to the rhythms and stuff like that. And then when I was in high school, I was exposed to Dead Mouse and Swedish House Mafia, and that's kind of like where everything started. And then I discovered dubstep when I was in high school. So this is like back in like 2000, like 5 to 2008. So that's
Yeah.
when dubstep was like at its like peak too, before the whole like bro step kind of took over. So that was like a really fun, and like I couldn't believe that this kind of sound was created into something that made sense, and it blew my mind at that time.
Yeah. Um yeah, that was like, I also reflect on that period of time and like, getting into the scene at about the same time. It's like I'm also grateful that I was like the age that I was when, like, like I feel like that was a moment in time and I'm happy that I got to be a part of it. But yeah, anyways. So then, like, what, you had played the saxophone and stuff in middle school, and then did you kind of at some point like leave that behind, or were you still playing throughout like in high school and stuff?
I never had access to my own saxophone. So when I was in middle school, I was always using the school's one that I was borrowing. But I had my own for all the years I went to school. But then when I went to high school, I was doing more sports and I wasn't doing band as much, and I couldn't. My family unfortunately couldn't afford for me to get a saxophone. But I switched over, and my brother's friend gave him one of his old guitars, and we fixed it up. And I picked up guitar when I was a freshman in high school instead, and that's like when I transitioned playing more instruments and stuff like that. And then I picked up ukulele too shortly after, and I started playing a little bit of bass as well.
Oh, awesome. And so, it like, when was there like a kind of, like when you were doing that, were you kind of like messing around, just, like, trying to play covers, or were you already like trying to write some of your own music? I'm just wondering kind of like about that jump, from, you know, just being interested and like involved in music to that moment of kind of wanting to create your own thing.
So at that point, it was definitely just experimental and learning instruments kind of a thing. Unfortunately, I wasn't really around the environment to express my creativity the way I wanted to, and I wasn't like encouraged to do that as much. It was just more like if I was learning instrument, it was like a skill that I was learning, and that's kind of like how it was presented from my family's point of view more. So I wasn't in the creative environment till like was later in college, until I was till like right before I met you, honestly, till I was like, oh, now I know something that I can actually do and express it in the way I want to, and have a support group as well. Because at that time when I was like kind of just learning instruments and stuff like that, I didn't feel like I was could do anything too much with it. I just had fun doing it with my friends. And it just was never the environment that I was even like told or presented in my mind that, hey, I can make my own music quite yet. And I felt like I was okay. It wasn't like a rush or anything. I just was having fun like playing music and exploring different genres out there.
Yeah. And so, like, cuz it's funny, like I remember, yeah, like when I met you, and then like you started sometimes, like you would be like DJing a little bit at like when we were like pre-gaming for something or whatever. And I always thought like I just always appreciate when someone is like, trying to do something creatively, because it's also like you're putting yourself out there a little bit, kind of like, oh yeah, like I'm trying to like do this thing or whatever, which I think is always brave and cool. So was that like, was it at, like when you first started being like, oh yeah, like maybe I can like DJ a little bit at a party or whatever, was that ever intimidating, or did it just feel natural for you?
Um, I would say I was never intimidated by it until I got like a big gig and was playing in front of like a bigger crowd. Like playing house parties and stuff like that in pre-games was just for fun, and I never approached it in a serious manner. And because it honestly was like the same kind of feelings when I was just playing music growing up. It was the same kind of approach where it was just like experimental. I was having fun with it. I wasn't taking it too seriously. I was just excited to share music that I was discovering. And then, but once it transitioned to me making my own music and playing in front of like a real crowd, then it definitely it gets a little tricky when you're playing, instead of playing in front of 5 friends versus like a couple hundred people.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different approach.
Yeah. So was that transition from kind of more like, you know, playing at like a house party or something to making your own music and like starting to play like more big shows or whatever, or like, you know, real shows, that started happening for you like when you were in college, basically?
Yeah, that's I went to community college in the Bay Area, and then I transferred to CSUMB in Monterey Bay, and then that's when I was like actually like starting to explore it like deeply. And I found that I was really good at playing parties, and I was really good at coordinating, getting people together. And especially because Monterey is not like a crazy party school area. It's a very chill, mellow area. And that's why I
Yeah.
moved there. But I was the only guy playing like house and techno music out there. So a lot of people wanted me to come to their house to play house music.
Yeah.
So obviously I was down. And it just kind of the way that the events started growing happened in a natural manner though, so that I was just getting gigs and they were growing so that I was being comfortable doing it. And then I was picking up a couple of residencies in the area too, which helped out a lot in terms of just playing long gigs and stuff like that.
Yeah. What do you have a memory of like like your first kind of like bigger gig or whatever, or like maybe like your like first residency show or something? Do you remember what that felt like?
The first like big show that I was a part of was this event called Pass the Vibe with my friend Teddy, who actually he just moved down here to San Diego, and we're gonna start doing stuff again, which is really cool.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, so he actually saw me walk out of one of my DJ gigs. I used to have a residency at a sushi bar for a while, and at first it was a catering company, and I would go to like mansions and DJ for their catering gig, and then they opened up a restaurant in Monterey, and I was the resident there. So it was a really cool opportunity, but he just caught me walking out one day and was like, "Hey, I'm trying to start stuff," and we just ended up liking each other and hanging out. So we threw an event in Monterey, and it was like this free big event that went down on a Saturday night, and it was like jungle themed at this place called Wave Street Studios, which was like the super cool underground spot in downtown Monterey. And it was just like a bigger turnout than we planned, and it like went really well, and I didn't even expect that many people to be there. But after that, I was like, whoa, I could play like real shows and
Yeah.
everything. It went from like playing a sushi gig, like I was saying, in like house parties and like college campus parties, to throwing our own event at a like legit music studio with a couple hundred people.
How does something like that like come together, you know? Like did someone tell you like, "Oh, you could rent this place out?" Or I mean, I'm just always interested to like see how people kind of like start figuring that stuff out.
So for that venue, Teddy, the guy I was working with, he's the one who got the connection, and he had just moved to Monterey and was really fresh, and he kind of was just walking around meeting people, and he walked by the Wave Street Studio. They have like a little cafe outside of it, and it's mostly a recording studio. They don't even really do events there. And he kind of just went in and was talking with the owner, and he was just like, "Have you ever thought about doing events here?" And he let us use the space for free for that one trial, and it was just such a good turnout that it led to more opportunities after that, and it would have been a real venue if the pandemic didn't hit, but they had like more gigs starting to roll up. I don't know if you know the festival Cali Roots,
Oh
but
yeah.
they I helped to organize an after party at Wave Street Studio with a dispensary that was sponsored with us too, and we did like an after party for Cali Roots at that place, and that happened I think a couple months after our first party. So like
Oh,
the events
cool.
like we pretty much helped like this spot that was being unused, that was super dope. Like it was gonna like events were gonna start happening there, and then but then about a year later the pandemic happened, and then so I think they stopped for now.
Yeah. So like that first event, you know, like obviously it's not the same thing like I think like music or whatever, but you know, like for myself, like doing some like stand up and stuff, like going on stage is always kind of it's like nerve wracking. It's like a huge, it's obviously it's a huge thrill to like feel that audience reaction when it goes well. Um, but what is that like for for you, where it's like all of a sudden more people are showing up, more people are showing up? Do you feel like, oh God, like I hope I don't make a mistake while I'm like mixing a song, or like or is it just kind of all like feeding into the energy and making it more enjoyable?
So in terms of a place filling up, one of my best like most magical moments of experience a DJ experience is playing an empty room in the beginning of your set, and the end of your set's a filled room. It's the craziest kind of energy flow, and it helps you build your set up and get you more comfortable because you just see slowly people come in and in versus like, but when you're coming on like a closing set and the place is already full, it's a whole different kind of nerve wracking experience. And I personally I like playing in the empty room and then it getting filled because for me that's like dope. But if I'm playing like a later set, then I show up early and I feel out the vibe. And it's all about just like understanding the vibe and like getting comfortable with the crowd and like making friends in the crowd so that way when you're up there you see people and they already know you, kind of a thing. Because I don't know, I don't look I do focus a lot when I'm spinning, but I don't know. It depends, I guess, how many drinks I've had. But I'll get really into it now, and I'll try to make connections with people and make eye contact, and now and then. And just like knowing familiar faces from being there an hour before your set can make a huge difference in not knowing anyone. Because I walked into a gig super late, not knowing anyone in the club too, and it's like filled, and that's just kind of like a little bit overwhelming because you're just like, oh, I'm in a random room with random people playing my music.
Yeah, totally.
So I think it just depends on what environment you're going into, and then you got to have the right approach for that environment. But at this point, I'm getting better, and it's just more gigs and more experience will get you there.
Yeah, totally. So, after that kind of like first gig and things start opening up, were you already like writing some of your own music at that point, or like when?
That first gig, I played I think 4 of my own tracks. Even when I was playing house parties in Monterey, I was testing out tunes. The Pretty much everything I have put out right now was written during that time period in college. Um, I was just in a super creative flow, and I was making music not to release it. I was just making music to learn Ableton and to learn just to explore it. And it ended up I would play it at parties, and I would never tell people when I'm playing one of my own tracks because I wait for people to come up and be like, "What is this?" Or a really cool moment that happened actually. It was at a New Year's party that we did years ago, and my current roommate, he wasn't living with us at that time, but he tried to Shazam one of my tracks that wasn't out yet, and I was like, dude, this is one of my own, but crazy, now you can Shazam that track. It's out now.
Yeah.
So I remember telling him that I was like, you can now Shazam
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So what was it like when you first, like decided to make the like, you know what, I'm gonna like get Ableton and start like messing around? Like, how was that learning curve? Because I mean that I mean I've never opened it, but that software looks intimidating, to be honest.
Yeah, it's I'm still learning it. I still don't feel like I know anything, to be honest, in terms of creating like electronic music in that kind of format. I know I understand music in general, but it's an ongoing learning process. And any producer who tells you that they have it figured out is lying.
Yeah.
There's a million ways. It's really the way it's presented is there's a million ways you can do something, and there's not one right way to do it. And you got to figure out what works for you, kind of a thing. So, but luckily I was not using Ableton at first. I actually started with Reason, and I even started with GarageBand before that, just kind of playing around with beats and stuff like that because I was just really fascinated. And I would make simple drum loops with drum machines and stuff like that. Not necessarily like full tracks. I would just make snippets and ideas that I would just like really like dig. And then when I got Ableton, that's when I was like, okay, now I can focus those ideas into a complete project. And right when I got Ableton, within the first couple of months, I had finished projects that I was trying to play at parties.
Yeah. And what is like your kind of like songwriting process look like? Do you like have like a hook or something that you hear in your head, or is it more an experimentation of like trying different things in the program, and as you find stuff, molding it from there? What does that look like for you?
Every approach is much different. I only work on inspiration though. So that's like it doesn't matter what that inspiration is, but it's usually one idea that leads to multiple things. In my earlier projects, I definitely started out with bass lines a lot more because a lot of my music is obviously very bass line driven and with the percussions and stuff like that, and it's like a super good foundation for me to build off of. But nowadays it could be anything from a drum pattern to a synthesizer or a melody I come up with in my head. It has to be something that inspired me to the point where I'm like, I need to put this down and I need to hear it like done. But I would say it's usually the main idea of the track is what I lay down right away, and then I build off that. And even if that main idea I laid down might not pop out to someone else, that's the whole track is built around that concept.
And is it like the type of thing where sometimes when you building out that main idea, it can create the inspiration for the other layers that go on top, kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, usually when in my head when I come up with an inspiration thing, the other ideas are already popping up. It kind of happens like at the same time. It's not that I'm only focused on like let's say like I just like randomly come up with a really good bass line that I want to write down. I'm already like kind of thinking of percussions I can lay on top of that. I'm kind of thinking of like how I can like build up to it or break down this bass line and stuff. And like it just my mind is very crazy, and it won't only do one thing at a time. So when I understand one thing I'm really passionate about, I right away I'm thinking of how else I can add on to that. And by the time I'm in a session, I probably have two or three ideas to start with, rather than it just being one concept.
And so are you like kind of like, following the inspiration? Like when you get an idea, then as soon as you can, you just sit down in front of the computer and you're trying to kind of take it, uh, you know, all the way until you have a cohesive piece? Or is it like you work on it for a while, you shelve it, you come back to it? Um, or like, do you have an idea sometimes that you're like, oh, I want to do something with that. I want to do with something with that. And, but it doesn't always happen right away, or how does that work?
My best ideas are the least effort.
Mm,
That's what I'm starting to learn. At first, I would have because like not always the inspirations you're gonna have are necessarily worth pursuing, and it's kind of hard to learn that. And you gotta just learn that the hard way. That not everything is going to be great that you make. This is the whole part of being creative is that you gotta really dig deep and find what the best thing that you can do is. At least that's what I want to do is and to express it. So I've just noticed like the faster I wrap up something, usually the better the project ends up being. And the stuff that I ended up working deeper and deeper on is more of a forcing kind of a habit. And then those projects I will tuck away and I'll come back to in a long time because I know there's still something in there, or I'll take something out of that and add it to the other projects that are kind of ready flowing. But yeah, so for myself, I just like if the flow is going, then I stick with it. And if it's a quick process, it's been my best ideas from the shortest amount of time that I put into it, just because I was in that kind of a creative flow.
that's super interesting because I noticed totally the same thing, like with like my sketches or something. It's like a lot of times my ones that I feel like turn out the best are not like the idea that I had and then I wrote it and then a little later I shoot it. It's like if I have an idea and I get excited about it and I just like bang out the whole process quickly, those seem to be the ones that are, end up being my favorites. But yeah. So the I'm like not very music literate, but um I always hear people talking about like mastering, and it sounds complicated and hard, and like it seems like this thing that you have to do at the end that's a barrier to, a song being finished. Can you talk a little bit about mastering, or what that is, or how you deal with it?
Yeah. So mastering usually happens on like the engineering side point. Like usually the people who I personally get my stuff mastered on, I don't master my own tracks. Although I can master my own tracks, but everything I've put out so far, I get an audio engineer to master it. Because pretty much what it's doing, the best way I can put it is like it's making your track like radio quality. It's just pushing everything to its absolute limit so that it sounds crisp and layered perfectly so that it could be just of any quality, just like you would hear something on the radio. And so that's like usually something you got to pay for, because it's like those audio engineers get paid a lot. And luckily I have some friends who give me some good hookups, and mostly when I get records signed to labels, they handle that. That's part of my contract. So they pay for the mastering process and mixing too. But if I'm getting it mastered on my own, then I do the mix downs. So the mix down and the mastering kind of like go together, but they are two technically different processes.
And so a song doesn't have to really be like mixed down and mastered for you to play it out at a show necessarily, or does it?
Oh yeah, when I'm testing out tracks, they're not fully mixed and mastered. They'll have so like I'll throw my like quick version of a master on, which is just like a couple of quick steps just to push the volume, so that'll be as loud as everything else I play.
Yeah,
that's out. But if you were to like hear it on a sound system, it's going to sound fine. But if you were to hear it on your headphones, it's probably going to sound different.
yeah.
And then the mixing though, part for my own productions, I kind of mix as I write a track. So when I'm testing it out, it's not necessarily fully mixed, but it does have a good mix down on it, because that's just a part of how I write my tracks too.
Gotcha. Okay. So you kind of mentioned something there that I also wanted to ask you about, like how I'm always also interested in like, especially for, like upcoming, like independent artists like yourself, like how the business side of that works, where, you like some of your tracks, the ones that I've listened to a lot of times are like on a compilation of a label or something. And I like, how like, for example, your first track that you got put out, like how did that come about?
So the very first release I put out was with a group called Patchats and Techno from San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And at that point I was just about to move to San Diego, and my homie Peter, he hit me up and he goes, hey, because he's heard like my music before and he used to go party with me. He's another DJ, but he's just like, hey, this collective that I just moved to San Francisco and doing stuff with, they're looking for a couple more, demos to throw on their new compilation. And do you like have anything right now? And I hadn't put out any music or even thought about really releasing professionally. I was just making music, and I was like, sure, why not? I'll throw them 3 demos. So I just did my quick mastering process and shot them 3 demos, and they wanted to sign all 3, which was really
cool. That's awesome. That must have been a crazy feeling.
Yeah, it was really weird too, because I was expecting just to kind of get feedback, because like I hadn't really sent out anything yet. But they offered either for me to do a my own EP with all 3 tracks on it, or to put a track on the compilation like they were reaching out about. And I was like, well, I'm just going to do 1 track and just kind of see what happens from there, which I'm really glad I only did 1 track at that point too, because my alias at that time was just going by Cloud9 without the will on, because I wanted to keep it simple, but I didn't realize how overused just Cloud9 was. But all my handles were Will on Cloud9, so it was easy transition. But so my first track, it's called Break Ya off the, it's a Patchats and Techno compilation, came out in 2019, in summer 2019, and it's pretty dope. But it's under the alias Cloud9, and it's not even attached to my profile on Spotify or anything.
Oh yeah.
So it's just kind of out there, and that one's not even fully professionally mastered. That was just me mastering with me and my friends, because I kind of just put it out because they gave me the opportunity and they were like, we need to get it kind of going, kind of a thing. And I was like, fuck it, let's do it. And then I just kind of had that switch right now. I was like, wait a second, people want to sign my music. Maybe I should actually, I have all this music I've been working on just to play at parties, but maybe I should actually think about putting it out. And then I rebranded to Will on Cloud9, and then a couple months later I put out my second track, Saucy.
Yeah, I love that track.
And then it just kind of, yeah, that's a good one. That was a fun collaboration too, and it's just that was if you hear that quality compared to my first track, Break It, you can tell that there was a difference in the professional approach on my music, and I was like, now I can actually do
Yeah.
this kind of a thing. And then from there, it just kind of has been going.
Yeah. And so, um, you know, from that first release, did then you start having people like hit you up and say like, "Hey, do you have any tracks that, you might be interested to like put out with us?" Or is it just like meeting people in the scene and they say like, "Oh yeah, email me some of your stuff," or like how does it go from there?
So definitely meeting people in the scene was a first thing, and then I just right when I put out my first track, I immediately, because it was on a compilation, and I did that so I could kind of talk to other artists who are on it, and I immediately just reached out to them and asked them kind of what they did, and then they referenced me just labels to send my music to. They're like, these are labels looking for upcoming artists with your kind of style. Just reach out to them. So like literally the track Saucy that got signed after that was just something it was a record label recommended off someone else who I just met because of my first release, and they were like, "This is a really cool upcoming label." They're called Rock Bottom Records from LA, and they're crushing it right now with a bunch of huge releases and really really big names now too. So I'm pretty fortunate to have got picked up early on with them and put out like a pretty cool project. But yeah, it's just meeting people, and then the more I release music, the more I'm exposed to other people with more labels. And if I really like the label, I'll reach out. But now, luckily, I do. Like at first, at that point, when I was just putting out music, I was definitely doing more of the reaching out, and then people meet me at parties just telling me to send them music, kind of a thing. But now there's opportunities starting to come in where people are asking me to send them music, which is really cool. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at the point, so I don't have to do as much like digging, because you got to be. I'm just trying to. I want to be. I want it to be worth putting out my music, because this is still my passion project. It's not something I do technically full time. So I just want it to be worth it, and I feel like I have the passion to just really give it my all if I'm going to put out a project, even if it's just one track.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's also an interesting, I think, part of like any creative pursuit is that balance between like the thing that you love doing is like making music, but like also part of the thing, if you want your people to hear your music, is you have to like email and like try to have a social media presence or whatever. And it's like I find myself stuck with that sometimes, where it's like what I love like writing sketches and like making the videos, but like trying to post clips all the time and whatever, like that stuff just kills my soul a little bit. And so finding that balance is hard. Is that something that you've struggled with at all?
Yeah, I don't I now I use social networking mostly to talk to my friends who live far away, like in different countries and stuff like that. That's why I've always actively used it. But then when I started doing the music stuff, it totally switched to just being for marketing my music. And luckily, I have my manager right now, which Mitra. She's like helping me manage my music right
That's
now, which is
awesome.
really
Shout
cool.
out to Mitra.
She's kind of yeah, yeah. She understands that stuff a lot more. She is a realtor right now, so she knows how to market things very well. And like I run all my socials, but she kind of like helps guide me, and it's nice to have like a friend there to remind me to do stuff, and she's really supportive too.
That's awesome.
But I literally just use my like socials just for specifically just for my music and pushing stuff out there. And it is a lot of effort, and it takes up time, and it feels like a job at sometimes. But then the creativity that still you get to do makes it worth it. So it's like, it's worth the effort. But that's why I do right now. It's just like I'm not trying to push out way too much music. I'm really kind of taking my time and letting it come out naturally.
Yeah, I saw a great quote. I can't remember if it was a musician or a comedian or something once, but they said like, "You're not paying me to do the show. You're just paying me to go through all of the hassle of traveling to the show and like everything." It's like,
yeah, that is
yeah,
super real. That needs to be like on my
yeah.
tombstone or something. Yeah, all the effort that people don't see is it's pretty wild when you
Yeah,
experience
totally.
it.
So when you, because you're in Monterey, and then at some point, um, you like moved down to San Diego, and I started seeing you
Mhm.
connected with this Umbrella Friends project or group or whatever you want to call it. Like what was that? How did that happen? What's the story there?
So I actually met that group back at Dirty Bird Campout a few years before that. They already had a really small kind of gathering going. I'm like group kind of going, and we're throwing just like renegade events at festivals and stuff like that. And they just saw me play a renegade set and came up to me. We started talking, and then we exchanged, information, socials, and we just kind of like started supporting each other's music. It just like happened. I became friends with them. They're called they're friends for a
Yeah.
reason. It's a yeah it's cool. So I just stayed in contact with them, and then a lot of my friends were moving out to San Diego, and I was kind of in that post college weird phase where I didn't know what I was doing, and I knew I wanted to move, and I wanted to do something like that was more active in music. And that group was out here in San Diego trying to get me to come out here, and a bunch of my other friends and I just decided to move down here. And right away I was active, a member, and started promoting and helping at the events and getting booked and all that. It just kind of happened naturally because from straight meeting them, we just immediately started, staying in contact and started supporting each other's music because we liked each other.
Yeah. Can you talk about like the eh, I mean, I guess from my experience, for example, like coming into Berlin, it's like I started meeting like a lot of the other comedians there, and then like we were like meeting up and like not even necessarily collabing, but just like both working on stuff in a similar ilk at the same time, and like doing some bouncing of ideas off of each other. And like that was like super inspiring for me, just to feel like sometimes I feel like you can feel a little bit crazy, just where you're like, no, like I have to do this, like I have to sit down and work on my, you know what a lot of outside people might consider like a hobby or something. um so was that did you have a similar experience when you connected with them and went down to San Diego, or can you, how was that for you?
So San Diego is very much like what you're describing. How there's a lot of music groups out here and collectives and stuff like that who are coexisting with each other, and it's not much as a competition. I would say it's a more approach of like, oh, how can we book you and you guys book us, and us kind of support each other, which is really cool. And there's still, obviously everyone will put their group first, obviously, because you're trying to help yourself grow. But it's just really cool because I wasn't exposed to an environment where there's so many different collectives here and there. And because of that, you're constantly in those environments where people are talking about planning the next thing, and you get those ideas, and you're like, oh, that's a good idea. I've had this idea with that. And you kind of just, it's a natural conversation that happens every time I go out. It's just because there's so much going on here. And like, I'm involved with the Umbrella Friends, but I'm involved with like a couple of other collectives too out here that we do stuff. I do stuff with Spectrum, and then like I was saying, Passive Vibe just moved back down here too. And it's just a little bit here and there. And like my whole thing is I want to be kind of involved in a little bit of everything, and not just put like everything into like one basket kind of a thing. Because this is my passion project, like I've been saying. And I when there's opportunities out there, I'm gonna try to push out my music. And it's just cool that like a lot of the groups are very accepting of you doing stuff with multiple people, and then we're all working
Yeah,
together too.
that's awesome. um and so you just had like your guys' like first event back since the pandemic, and how was that? Like, it must, I mean, it's been probably what, over a year since you, I mean, you guys have been going strong with the live streams and stuff, but that's a different experience, I imagine, than getting to play for people who are actually, like vibing off the music and everything.
Right. So our last event, the last event that I played to, which was on a Friday the 13th in March of last year, we had a Umbrella Weekend, which was it was the weekend right before all the regulations hit. It was right after the Cross Festival, which I got to go to as well. So I got to do those back-to-back weekends right before the pandemic started. I was very
Yeah.
fortunate to go out with a bang. But we kind of through the festival came back and everything had changed, kind of thing, because we were out in the desert, kind of hearing what was going on, and like word from the pandemic kind of hit the week before, but we didn't know going into that was going to be our last event, kind of a thing. And so we had this most epic weekend that was supposed to build off into other opportunities. There were so many collaborations for this. So many people couldn't show up, obviously, because of everything that happened, and it ended up still being a big success. But so that energy luckily never died off, because we ended with such a crazy event that went really well. So we were ready to come back right away. And so this event that we just did was it was just a free public event that we encouraged donations for to get the location. We did it at Mission Beach here in San Diego, and we had an entire day of just bumping music with food vendors, and we had our merch for the first time, which was really cool. And it was just it felt like kind of like a Burning Man or a favela type vibe from Lightning in a Bottle set up on a beach with like just a bunch of vendors and stuff. And it was totally like we were trying to be very patient to come back and do something proper. And it was way bigger than we planned. So many more people showed up than expected. There was not really any major bumps or anything that prevented the event from being what it was. And it was just more successful than planned, and it was so humbling. And such a crazy, like, it just like for like everyone, you saw people take a moment and they're just like, damn, we're back, kind of a thing. And it was wild. And I can't believe that we pulled it off. And I'm very fortunate to be involved with so many creative people right now. And it was just like us collabing with other artists too that we brought on. And anytime we're bringing people on, they're helping out too, which is amazing. So we just had so much help, and it was I'm really excited. I don't know if you could tell, like it really, like, it got me inspired again, because obviously we've all been in a rut and stuff, and I haven't really been going to shows or anything. So it was my first time being in a crowd and seeing people and being okay with it. And it was,
Yeah, I feel like this summer is going to be wild. You know, just everybody is, yeah, as you said, I think been in a, been missing that connection, that outlet, and yeah, that you said something that reminded me of something else I wanted to ask you about, which was, how, you know, just can being at a show help like inspire you to write more music, just, kind of dancing and like being with other people, or like where what do you think like kind of inspires you when to sit down and like write a song?
being in a crowd in a live environment is, you can't really beat it, because there's just moments that you experience that you're like, I want to capture that moment. And those are kind of the times that I like for a live setting. Those are like the biggest inspirational moments I find. And I definitely was missing that, because like when that's how you want your music to be experienced, is that experience that you just had too. So yeah, that's a huge aspect for me. Luckily, I'm sitting on so much music I was writing back in college that I'm not even necessarily writing tons of new material right now. I'm redefining all the tracks that I was inspired by when I was heavily going to shows and writing down these ideas. And now I'm maturing those ideas into the Cloud9 sound that's starting to develop, and it's just coming out. And I'm really excited that I was able to build a library of stuff when I was able to experience that moment. Because if I was trying to write fresh music during this pandemic, I would have struggled hardcore. All the stuff I put out was stuff I had already written. I think I think probably 2019, 18 is the last time I wrote any of the tracks that are currently out.
Yeah. Wow.
Right now. So it's like stuff that I kind of have been sitting on, but just been shaping. And there's few people who got to see the development of them, and they're like, wow, it's like done now.
Yeah.
And out there.
That's really cool. So is that because that, I've talked to like a couple other like producers and stuff for the podcast, and that's kind of like it's been kind of a common thing I feel like I've been hearing, which is that it's been hard to write music in the pandemic. But that you found that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really. I don't think I wrote one new complete idea. I have little stuff I've done here and there, but I was just like I wasn't even when stuff was really gnarly and stuff like that. I wasn't even putting out music for a little bit because I didn't feel like it was the right time. And then I'm honestly really glad I waited because the next EP I put out went number one. So it was kind of, and it was just tracks that I was just redefining, and I was just kind of playing live streams and mixing and stuff like that. But it was hard. It was definitely hard to find new creativity. I'm even still trying to find new creativity to write new stuff. But again, I'm just sitting on so much music that I'm not in a rush to necessarily even write new stuff because I feel like there's ideas I already have that are worth pursuing. And I'm sitting on like over 30 demos right now that are complete ideas that if I just took a little bit more effort, they could be something I could send out, and possibly put out with a label or something. So it's just, I have so much music I'm sitting on. So luckily I didn't have the pressure to like need to write new music because I had new music written. I just was waiting for the right time to put stuff out. And I'm really glad I was patient. I'm really glad. I really wanted to put out some new stuff early, and I even backed out of a couple deals like in early summer last year because it just didn't feel right when just pandemic was going on. The Black Lives Matter protest was going on here, especially in San Diego, got hit really hard. It just didn't feel like a time to put out stuff and distract like with what's going on in the world. But now that people are starting to experience and live their lives again, it's time to put out that enjoyment.
Yeah. So, what is like? Do you have any, like, kind of like what your creative process, like an outline of what your creative process is usually, or is it vary from song to song and or track to track, and also like it sounds a little bit like sometimes maybe you finish 5 ideas in a week, and then sometimes it's like 2 months and you don't write anything new.
Yeah, so the length will vary, but I would say there definitely is a pattern of the process because it's just it goes from just having an idea to having a completed project. That's kind of how I view it. And by the time, if I export something out of Ableton, then it's something I want to like hear in my car to test out to potentially hear to play at a gig or something. And that's kind of like the steps it goes. So it goes from like just creating something to then exporting it to then playing it out and then to then deciding if this is worth pursuing to a final project to potentially release. So there is a pattern, but the time will completely vary. Because like I was saying, my best stuff like took the least amount of time, but there are projects that I, felt were worth pursuing and I put the time into it and they ended up coming out and being worth, that effort.
So your newest, like the track that you just put out, can you talk to us or tell us a little bit about like what the process was with that? That was a track that you wrote kind of back in 2019 then, and then you've been kind of redefining it and fitting it into the like sound that you're trying to create with Cloud9.
Yeah. So the current one, it doesn't officially come out till next Thursday.
So in the world of this podcast, it's out tomorrow. Yeah.
It's out tomorrow. Yeah. Sorry.
May 27th.
So it comes out May 27th. And that is a collaboration on a compilation with a label from Monterey, actually, with another artist out there who he had reached out to me a while ago, saying that he was starting his own record label. And he put out one track on his own out of it. And I told him, when I had time, I would hit him back up. And after I finished my last EP that dropped in the beginning of this year, which was a 3-track EP, I waited a little bit and then I hit him up and I was like, hey, I'm ready now. I kind of wanted to learn the behind the scenes of what it is to put out something with a label too. And he was down and we came up with the idea to do a compilation, and we decided to call it, because his record label is called Ross and Sauce Collective. And we decided to call it Saucy Selections Volume 1, which will lead to other, ones that we can have, which is,
Yeah.
plays off of his label name. And obviously I've used Saucy in my tracks too, so I love
Yeah.
that way to describe
That's a great
music.
name.
But I sent him 2 of my demos because I wanted him to pick the track to come out on, because he likes all my music, but I want to make sure he wanted to put in something that fits his label. So I'm sending him a more housey track and a more harder techno track, and he, to my surprise, even though he's like a booty kind of bass house producer, he picked the techno track that he wanted to have on it, and it's probably my hardest hitting track that I've put out. The track is called Sporadic, which it definitely the name I kind of just threw on it because it describes like my process of everything, and how, like, I'm just was telling you, when I come up with an idea, it's my brain works very sporadically. And this is one of those projects that came together super quickly, but I've been just kind of sitting on it because it is like a harder hitting, more experimental, dark track with a weird synthesizer on it. And it's I'm pretty proud of it. And I didn't think he was going to pick it, but I am very happy he did. And it's the only like techno track on the comp too, but it rounds out the compilation. So it has like every track on the comp has something that, has like a resemblance of the other track. So there's an overall vibe, but each track is a different subgenre of house and techno. So it's all very different,
Cool.
but there's still an overall theme going on. But definitely I think that my track's probably one of the harder hitting ones. It's
And
really
will that
cool. I'm
be
pretty pumped about it.
available like on Spotify, or is it come out on Beatport first, or?
Yeah. So yeah, it's gonna be available on Beatport pretty soon. The pre-saves for Spotify, Apple Music, and all the other streaming platforms is available right now. And so on Thursday, you'll be able to stream it and purchase it anywhere, the whole comp or any one of the tracks that you would like. All the links
And
are
they will be
within my
in the
socials
description
and all
of
that
this
good
video,
stuff.
so you can just click on it, check it out, get down on it. That's exciting, man. I'm excited to hear the new track. And how like do you like do you some like the genre, like if you're making like a house, more of like a house track or like a techno track, is that something that you already come in with when you first start? Or do you start building the song kind of first and then see where, what genre it kind of seems to fit more into?
Yeah, I think it develops because all my stuff is not necessarily straight techno or straight house at all. It's a combination of genres, but the track's developing, it'll favor one side or the other for sure. Too, like every release I've had so far has been a different subgenre of that, like listed, that you can look at, which is really cool because I want to have a big variety, and every time I make a track, it's always a different kind of variety. But there is still this core kind of sound that's starting to mature and develop within my productions that I'm getting really stoked on, because I'm starting to more get defined on what my sound is. But I'm still also learning and developing it because it's just a process that's going to be ongoing and growing. But it's definitely the productions are definitely getting darker and deeper for sure. And the San Diego minimal influence has definitely now hit my percussions, which I'm really stoked about because I can take something minimal but still have my big sounds in it.
Yeah, I think there's something like creatively, just generally, that's exciting about that that process of like trying to, find your voice or find your sound or whatever, and like feeling like sensing, like even if it's not there, like sensing you're like, oh, I like the direction this is going. I haven't found exactly the thing for me, I'm saying, but like for me, I have this feeling sometimes where I'm like, oh, I haven't found it exactly, but like I like the path at least that I'm on. Um,
Yeah, I feel the same way. I don't feel like I found it.
yeah,
I like the path though. The path it's making sense, and the path is
yeah,
getting
yeah.
wider,
That's a
I would
perfect
say.
way to say it.
You know.
Well, so I we can wrap up here soon, but I wanted to ask, do you have like a best or worst memory from like a live show playing out, like one time that just was like a dream, or a time that like everything went wrong or something like that to share?
Um, There's been a couple incidences. There's been a couple song request incidences with very rude, drunk women while playing at a couple clubs. That's happened. Specifically, one time, a spilt drink and her hand going on top of the CDJ to
Oh
stop the
no.
music as well. So it's like a double whammy in there. That's that, like similar situations like that has happened to me a couple of times. Sound, when we were first running shows, I've had sound completely cut out during my set and just shut down, and then that was kind of it for the night. Like,
Yeah, just like, well, time to go home.
I would say, honestly, that was probably worse than the drunk girl. Just
Yeah.
that was like send everyone home. But I don't know.
Yeah.
That's on me versus it being on someone else, though. So there's two scenarios right there for you.
Yeah.
Where I fucked up and someone else fucked up.
You just made me think of this, but I always am like, do you have to kind of like learn how like sound systems work and like the tech side of that stuff if you guys are like throwing events or even like, you know, like doing the live streams? I'm like, there's like a certain amount of like technical knowledge needed to pull off doing stuff like that. Is that challenging, or do you enjoy like learning about that stuff?
So for actual events, we have a sound team who specifically just does sound, and that's it. I'm not one of those people. I'll help the sound team bring everything in, and I know everything plugs in, but we have specific people who can do that. For live streams, that was a process that I just had to learn when shit shut down. I just got comfortable. I got new gear, like the camera I'm using right now. I didn't have a camera before, and luckily I had a microphone. Our DJ decks are easy to hook up within the program, and very, very luckily I have a Scarlett, which changes the game to hook up any kind of audio. So you can, with any kind of audio interface, you can stream anything pretty much. So it was just learning a program, spending a couple hours doing that. For live shows, we just just the right people doing it. Yeah, but it was a headache at first doing the live streams. We definitely, the first couple streams I did were not like successful, but now the last ones I did, I haven't done one in a minute now because I'm ready to get back to live shows. But we definitely had it figured out. And now if there's any opportunities to do a live stream, we have that in our back pocket completely figured out, which I think because before the idea of having a live stream before the pandemic hit was actually a unique experience too. It'd be like, oh, I'm live streaming a show. It's like, oh, that's so cool. I get to see it now too and not have to be there. But obviously that's shifted and people are overseeing live streams. But I think in about a year or so, that'll come back where like every now and then having a live stream happen for a show would be a really cool thing to do. And I like that I have it figured out now so I can do that.
Yeah.
You know,
well, and it's nice, like, I don't know, for me, like with you and like a couple of your live streams, and I have another friend who's like a DJ in San Francisco, and like they did a live stream, and it's like being in Berlin, it's nice to be able to like still like check it out or whatever, and like be able to check out the show. Or when if it was just a physical show, there would be no way to you know, listen or whatever. But yeah, what about? Oh no, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
you're good. Go ahead. No, you're good. Go ahead.
So, have you had a moment of like playing a show where you had a kind, like it was a, I mean, I know it's still a passion project for you, but have you had a type of like I've made it moment playing a show where it just feels like holy shit, like look at how far I've come?
I don't think for in terms of the shows I've played quite yet, the biggest like opportunity I've had so far for shows was I got to play a Desert Heart stream, which is fucking amazing. With that was just like, I can't believe that I was presented that opportunity, and I got to play a lot of my own music. But in terms of like the other side of stuff is like I've seen more success in my productions than I have in my gigs, and like having my second EP ever come out go #1 on Beatport was definitely the kind of moment where I was like, holy shit, I can actually put out quality music that people like are digging, and I might actually be able to do this a little more seriously. That was definitely a moment.
That's cool
For me.
So one of the other questions I always like to ask at the end is there like a story at all behind your name?
Yeah, there is a little bit of a story. I don't know if you've ever met my good friend Esteban. So he actually has a vocal hook on the track Saucy. He one of the voices is his voices that was used on it. Because I use my voice for a lot of my tracks, but he randomly recorded a vocal hook that fit perfectly with this track and the whole theme of it too. All he says is can't take the heat, get your ass out the kitchen, and it totally worked, and he did it in like one take too. I remember when we were just messing around in my room, Monterey. But okay, so going back to my name though, he's the one who gave me the Cloud9 name. Was back in San Jose when I got this place. I think
I went there one time. I remember that house.
Yeah. I think you did. Yeah. It was a really dirty house, but that's when I first got my own DJ equipment and was starting to actually play parties and stuff like that. And we were chilling in my room, and he referred to it as Cloud9 because that was the feeling we were in there, because it was like the first time I had a place on my own.
Yeah.
I was still living with his parents, so we could do whatever we want there. And we were blasting music, and he would refer it to as that. And then, so I just threw that on as my name. And, my socials just turned into Will on Cloud9, and once I figured out that not going with Cloud9 was just not unique enough, I just switched it to Will on Cloud9.
Yeah,
it made sense.
I agree. I think it's a great name. So it's a good one.
Thank you.
Well, I think that we covered it all pretty much, man. Do you feel like there's anything else that you want to add or anything?
Nothing really. Just stoked to share with everyone this new comp coming out. Stoked for you to hear it. I wish I could have showed you it before, but
I'll check it out, and maybe I'm super excited for everybody watching. The link to that is in the description below. Will's socials and his Spotify. Go check out his music. Enjoy it. And yeah, man, well, let's do it again in a couple years when you have some more releases and shows to talk about. It'll be fun.
Well, hopefully you'll be able to come to a show now you're back in the States.
Dude,
so
I would love to. I'd love to.
Eventually.
Awesome.
Yeah. We'll get you out here, man.
Dude, you're always welcome. Always welcome in Berlin. Well, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it. This was fun. Yeah, for sure. So playing us out a little bit more of Will's music. Check out the descriptions below.